A wealthy man abandons his own daughter in a deserted forest, but hope emerges when his loyal parrot, a witness to the crime, flies off in search of help, finding an unexpected truck driver to ask for assistance. The silence that followed the hum of the luxury car's engine, now distant, lay like a heavy shroud over the forest. But for Loro, the parrot with vibrant feathers and intelligent eyes, that silence was a deafening scream. He had seen it. He had seen the man, his little friend's father, leave the girl alone, a vulnerable speck amidst the vast, menacing green. An instinct to protect, cultivated by years of companionship and play, ignited within him. With a shrill squawk that echoed through the trees, Loro launched himself into the air. His wings, accustomed to short flights within the mansion and garden, now beat with desperate strength. He didn't know exactly where to go, but he knew he had to go out. To where there were people, to where there was help. The forest air was dense, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Branches and vines seemed to reach out to stop him, but Loro dodged them with surprising agility. His bird heart pounded erratically, not just from the physical exertion, but from the anguish that gripped him. "Lily, Lily," he murmured, a word repeated in his mind, a mantra of urgency. The image of the small, frightened girl, huddled under the shadow of a colossal tree, spurred him on. He flew higher, searching for a clearing, a sign of civilization, anything to break the green monotony. After what felt like an eternity, minutes that stretched into hours for him, a grey gleam appeared on the horizon, a straight, artificial line that contrasted violently with the wild nature. The road. Loro felt a pang of hope. With a final effort, he dove towards the asphalt strip, landing breathless on a low branch at the roadside. The noise was deafening. Cars sped by, creating gusts of wind that swayed the branch and made him tighten his grip. No one noticed a green and yellow parrot, however vibrant, amidst the rush of modern life. Frustration began to erode his determination. How would he do it? How would he explain? It was then that a deep, constant sound began to approach. A truck, enormous, noisy, a metal monster that seemed to swallow the road. Loro felt a mix of fear and desperation. It was his chance, or perhaps his only chance. Inside the truck cabin, Zay, a middle-aged man with skin weathered by the sun and the road, yawned. Another long delivery, another night without proper sleep. His eyes, accustomed to the monotony of the landscape rolling by the window, registered something unusual, a parrot, at the roadside, and it didn't seem to be just any parrot. It was agitated, flapping its wings frantically as if trying to get attention. Out of curiosity, Zay slowed down. He had seen everything on the road, but a wild parrot so close to the highway was rare. As the truck approached, the bird leaped from the branch and flew directly towards the windshield, landing on the side mirror just inches from Zay's face. "Hey buddy, what's up? Are you lost?" Zay murmured, a tired smile appearing on his lips. He expected a squawk, maybe a bird's cry, but what came next made Zay's smile freeze. "Help! Help! Girl! Forest! Danger!" The voice, though shrill and a little metallic, was unmistakable. It was a human voice, and the words were clear. Zay blinked, incredulous. He braked sharply, the truck squealing slightly, and looked at the parrot, which now stared at him with an intensity bordering on desperation. "What? You spoke?" Zay stammered, feeling a chill run down his spine. "Girl! Lily! Alone! Help!" The parrot repeated, flapping its wings harder, pointing its head towards the dense forest from which it had come. Its eyes, bright and fixed on Zay's, seemed to plead. Zay's fatigue vanished instantly, replaced by stunned confusion and growing fear. This was no joke. That bird wasn't just repeating phrases. It was asking for help, and the urgency in its eyes was palpable. A girl, alone, in that forest. Zay's mind, accustomed to the logic of the road, began to process a reality that defied all his understanding. Something terrible had happened, and a parrot was the only witness. The chill that ran down Zay's spine wasn't just from the shock of hearing a parrot speak, but from the gravity of the words. "Girl! Lily! Alone! Help!" The urgency in the bird's shrill voice was undeniable, and the way it pointed to the forest with its head and entire body seemed like a desperate plea. "Hold on, hold on." Zay tried to process. His mind, accustomed to the relentless logic of the road, was short-circuiting. You're saying there's a girl alone in there?" He gestured towards the green, impenetrable mass. Luro, as if perfectly understanding the man's incredulity, flapped his wings again, flying a little higher and landing back on the mirror, his eyes fixed on Zay's. "Lily, danger, father, bad." The last word, bad, came out with an almost angry, or perhaps deeply sad, intonation. Zay swallowed hard. Father, bad. This was too much. A parrot that not only spoke, but seemed to be narrating a crime. The exhaustion of the journey gave way to a cold adrenaline. He couldn't just ignore it. What if it was true? What if there was a child in real danger, abandoned, and he, Zay, was the only person help had reached? "All right, buddy," Zay said, his voice firmer now, the decision taking shape in his mind. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm not leaving a child alone. Show me the way." He pulled the truck over to the shoulder, as close as possible to the rudimentary entrance of a poorly marked trail that disappeared into the vegetation. He turned off the engine, the ensuing silence almost as deafening as the previous noise. He grabbed his flashlight, a water bottle, and a multi-tool knife he always carried. The forest, seen up close, was even denser and darker, with colossal trees whose canopies filtered the sunlight, creating a perpetual twilight. "Let's go, Luro," Zay called, opening the cabin door. The parrot, as if waiting for the command, flew from the mirror and landed on his shoulder. The bird's light weight and the brush of its feathers were a strange confirmation of the situation's reality. With each step Zay took into the forest, the temperature seemed to drop, and the sound of the highway dissipated, replaced by a symphony of insect hums and rustling leaves. The smell of damp earth and decaying vegetation was strong. The trail was almost non-existent, and Zay had to dodge low branches and vines that seemed to want to entangle him. "Is it this way?" Zay asked, his voice slightly muffled by the forest's density. Luro let out a sharp squawk and flew a few meters ahead, landing on a branch and looking back as if to say, "Come on." His intelligent eyes gleamed in the gloom. Zay followed, his flashlight cutting beams of light through the green darkness. Fear began to set in, fear of the unknown, of strange sounds coming from all sides, of the possibility of wild animals. But the thought of the girl, of Lily alone and defenseless, was a shield against panic. "Lily, Lily," Luro occasionally murmured, keeping Zay focused on the mission. Time seemed distorted in there. Minutes dragged like hours, and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Zay, a man accustomed to the safety of his cabin and the predictability of the road, felt like an intruder, vulnerable. He tripped over an exposed root, almost falling, but quickly regained his balance. "Lily, there! Big tree!" Luro suddenly squawked, flying faster and pointing his head in a specific direction. There was a renewed urgency in his voice, a tone of relief mixed with desperation. Zay quickened his pace, his heart pounding in his chest. His flashlight beam swept the area, and then, amidst the dense foliage and the massive trunk of a centuries-old tree, he saw it. A small, huddled figure, almost invisible in the darkness. It was her. It was Lily. A knot formed in Zay's throat. Incredulity had vanished, replaced by an overwhelming wave of compassion and anger. A father, abandoning his own daughter. That was inhumane. "Lily!" Zay called, his voice hoarse, running the last few meters. The parrot flew ahead, landing on the girl's shoulder, who was motionless, her eyes wide with fear. The girl didn't move, looking like a statue of terror. Luro, on her shoulder, began to nuzzle her face with his head, emitting soft, comforting chirps. "Lily, Zay, friend." Zay knelt, his flashlight illuminating the child's pale, dirty face. She was so small, so fragile. Her eyes, filled with dried tears, fixed on his. He didn't know what to say, how to begin to undo the trauma she had suffered. But one thing was clear: he had found her. And now the race against time entered a new phase, getting her out of there safely. Her eyes, filled with dried tears, fixed on his, a mix of terror and a flicker of hope. Luro, on her shoulder, continued to nuzzle her face with his head, emitting soft, comforting chirps. "Lily, Zay, friend," the parrot murmured, as if introducing the two. "Hi, Lily," Zay said, his voice trying to be as gentle as possible, but still hoarse with emotion. He slowly extended his hand without touching her, so as not to scare her further. "I'm Zay. Luro brought me here to help you." Lily didn't respond. Her lips trembled slightly, but no sound came out. She was in shock, her body huddled against the tree trunk, as if she wanted to merge with the bark. Zay noticed the dirt on her clothes, the scratches on her exposed arms and legs. She looked exhausted and hungry. "Are you okay? Hurt?" Zay asked, his voice full of concern. He examined her with the flashlight, looking for obvious injuries. There was no blood, but her paleness and immobility were alarming. "We need to get out of here, Lily. It's getting really dark." Luro flew from Lily's shoulder to Zay's, as if to reinforce the message. "Dark, danger, leave." Zay nodded. "He's right, little one. It's dangerous here. Can you walk?" Lily shook her head negatively, an almost imperceptible movement. Her eyes welled up again, and a fresh tear rolled down her dusty cheek. The sight broke Zay's heart. The anger against the father who abandoned her burned in his chest, but he suppressed it. Now was not the time for that. "All right," Zay said, his voice calmer and more determined. "I'll carry you." He approached slowly, extending his arms. "Come, I'll carry you. You'll be safe." The girl hesitated for an instant, her gaze fixed on Zay's face, seeking some reassurance. Luro, sensing her doubt, flew back to Lily's shoulder and gently pecked her ear. "Zay, good, friend." With the parrot's confirmation, Lily seemed to relax minimally. She extended her thin arms, a gesture of surrender and childlike trust. Zay carefully picked her up, feeling her light, fragile weight in his arms. She was smaller than he imagined, and her body was tense, but she didn't resist. He held her against his chest, trying to convey warmth and security. The smell of earth and child's sweat mingled with the aroma of the forest. "There you go, little one," Zay murmured, adjusting her in his arms. "Let's go home." He stood up, the flashlight now in one hand, illuminating the way back. Luro flew ahead, landing on a branch and waiting. The journey back would be harder. Carrying Lily, who was in shock and likely exhausted, through that dense, dark vegetation was quite a challenge. Each step was cautious. Zay had to bend down, dodge branches and roots, and protect the girl from any impact. Lily, her head nestled on his shoulder, seemed to have fallen asleep or fainted from exhaustion, her body limp but still clinging to Zay's shirt. "Slowly, Luro," Zay whispered to the parrot, who seemed impatient, flying a few meters ahead and returning. "I can't go that fast with her." The parrot understood, slowing the pace of its flights, but still maintaining the lead. The forest seemed even darker now that twilight was deepening. Night sounds began to emerge, the croaking of frogs, the buzzing of larger insects, the rustling of leaves that could be the wind or some animal moving. Zay felt sweat trickle down his forehead, not just from the physical exertion, but from the tension. He needed to get her out of there before night fell completely and the dangers of the forest multiplied. "Almost there, Lily," he murmured, more to himself than to the girl. "Almost there." He quickened his pace. The image of the truck on the road, a beacon of safety and civilization, propelling him forward. With every meter, the hope of escaping that green hell increased, but so did the urgency. He knew that time was crucial, not only for Lily's physical safety, but for her emotional recovery. He needed to get her out of that nightmare as quickly as possible. The forest, which before seemed merely dense, now transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and menacing sounds. Twilight had given way to almost total darkness, and Zay's powerful flashlight barely managed to pierce the curtain of foliage. Every step was a battle. Zay felt Lily's weight in his arms, a light weight, but one that became monumental with fatigue and the difficult terrain. He had to bend, dodge branches that whipped through the air, and be careful not to trip over treacherous roots that rose from the ground like traps. The girl, nestled on his shoulder, seemed a precious and fragile burden. She was limp, but occasionally a small tremor ran through her body, a silent reminder of the trauma that kept her in a state of stupor. "We're almost there, little one," Zay murmured, his voice hoarse, more to himself than to her. Sweat streamed down his forehead, mixing with the dirt and leaves clinging to his skin. His muscles burned, but the image of Lily's frightened face propelled him. The anger against her father boiled in his chest, a flame that kept him warm against the forest's chill and despair. Luro, faithful and tireless, flew ahead, his sharp, repetitive squawks serving as a sonic beacon in the darkness. "Way! Zay, Lily! Quick!" The parrot's words were a mantra, a constant urgency that prevented Zay from slowing down. The bird seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, the race against time that intensified with each passing minute of the night. The sounds of the nocturnal forest were amplified. The croaking of frogs seemed deeper, the buzzing of insects closer, the rustling of leaves. Once just background noise now sounded like stealthy footsteps. Zay felt the eyes of invisible creatures upon him, a sensation of being an intruder in a wild and indifferent realm. He held Lily tightly against him, as if his own body could protect her from all imaginable dangers. "Don't worry, Lily," he whispered, smelling the earth and child's sweat in her hair. "I won't leave you, never again." The promise was more to himself, a way to reaffirm his commitment to that innocent life he held in his arms. Suddenly, Luro let out a louder cry, a squawk of triumph. "Light, Zay, light!" Zay lifted his head, sweeping the flashlight in the direction the parrot pointed. For an instant, he thought it was a trick of his exhausted mind, but then he saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible patch of orange and white light through the dense foliage. It was the road. It was his truck. A wave of relief so strong it almost made him stumble hit him. Fatigue seemed to vanish for a moment, replaced by a burst of adrenaline. He quickened his pace, ignoring the branches that scratched his legs and the vines that tried to entangle him. The light became clearer, more defined, and soon he could distinguish the contours of his truck's cabin parked on the shoulder. The last few meters were the hardest, but also the most rewarding. He emerged from the forest, swaying slightly into the relative clarity of the road. The air felt lighter, less oppressive. The distant sound of a car passing on the highway was music to his ears. With a sigh of exhaustion, Zay approached the truck's passenger door. Luro, who had flown ahead, was already perched on the side mirror, watching him with his bright eyes. "We made it, buddy," Zay said to the parrot, his voice choked with emotion and fatigue. He carefully opened the door, the cabin's interior light revealing Lily's pale, sleeping face. She was still clinging to his shirt, a small fist clenched at his shoulder. He gently settled her into the passenger seat, reclining it so she could lie down. The blanket he always kept there was pulled over her. Lily huddled under the soft fabric, a small whimper escaping her lips. Zay touched her forehead, It was cold. He sat in the driver's seat, his body aching but his heart filled with a strange mix of relief and concern. The flashlight's beam revealed the scratches on his arms, the dirt on his clothes. He was exhausted, but the mission wasn't over yet. "And now, Luro?" Zay asked the Parrot, who was now on the dashboard looking at the girl. "What do we do now?" Luro tilted his head, his eyes fixed on Lily. "Lily, safe. Hospital. Doctor." Zay nodded, his mind already working. Hospital. Yes, that was the next logical step. She needed medical care, someone who could assess her physical and emotional state. He took out his cell phone, which fortunately still had battery, and dialed the emergency number. The operator's voice on the other end of the line seemed unreal, coming from a world he had forgotten in the depths of the forest. "Hello? I need help. I found an abandoned child in the forest." He looked at Lily, sleeping soundly, and then at Luro, who watched him with an almost human intelligence. The race against time had saved a life, but Lily's journey to recovery was just beginning. Zay hung up the phone, the operator's voice still echoing in his ears, promising a rescue team and an ambulance on the way. The relief was a weight almost as heavy as the exhaustion that now completely overwhelmed him. He leaned his head against the seatback, closing his eyes for an instant. The silence of the cabin, which before seemed a refuge, was now filled with the echoes of the forest, his own accelerated heartbeats and Lily's soft breathing. He opened his eyes and looked at the girl. Under the faint cabin light, her face seemed even paler, her long eyelashes resting on her dirty cheeks. She was huddled under the blanket, looking so small and fragile. Zay felt a pang in his chest. He had saved her from the forest. But what had he saved her from, after all? From a father who abandoned her, from a cold and dangerous night, from wild animals. But the trauma, the fear, the loneliness she must have felt, that wouldn't be erased by a rescue. Luro on the dashboard turned his head and stared at him. Lily. Sad. Zay. Help. "Yes, buddy," Zay murmured, his voice hoarse. "We'll help, but it's going to be a long road for her." He reached out and gently touched Lily's hair. It was tangled with bits of leaves and dirt. He wondered how long she had been there alone. Hours, a whole day. Her father's cruelty was something he couldn't process. How could a human being do something like that to his own daughter? The anger, which had been fuel in the forest, now transformed into a dull, helpless ache. The truck was parked on the shoulder, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Zay started the engine, not to leave, but to turn on the heater. The cold night air was starting to seep in through the cracks, and he wanted Lily to be as comfortable as possible. The soft hum of the engine filled the cabin, a familiar and comforting sound. He adjusted the passenger seat so she could lie down more and pulled the blanket up to her chin. While waiting for the rescue team, Zay tried to organize his thoughts. He was a truck driver, a simple man, accustomed to the solitude of the road. He never imagined he would be the protagonist of such a dramatic story. He looked at Luro. The parrot, with its peculiar intelligence, had been the true hero. Without him, Lily probably wouldn't have been found. "You're an angel, Luro," Zay said, a faint smile appearing on his tired lips. Luro squawked, fluffing his feathers. "Angel. Good. Zay. Good." The small interaction brought a moment of lightness, but the gravity of the situation soon returned. Zay grabbed a water bottle and took a few sips, feeling his throat dry. He was exhausted, but couldn't relax. Adrenaline still coursed through his veins, and his concern for Lily was constant. He thought about what he would tell the police. He would tell the story exactly as it happened, of the parrot asking for help, of the search in the forest, of the cruel abandonment. He knew Lily's father would have to be found and held accountable. The image of the man whom Luro had described as bad lingered in his mind. He hoped justice would be served. Lily stirred, a small sigh escaping her lips. Her eyes slowly opened, blinking a few times before focusing on Zay. The fear was still there, deep, but there was also a flicker of recognition. "Zay," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "Yes, little one, it's me," Zay replied, leaning in a bit. "You're safe now. We're in my truck. Help is coming." She looked at Luro, who approached her on the dashboard, nuzzling her hand. Lily. Safe. Zay. Friend. A tear rolled from Lily's eyes, but this time it didn't seem to be from terror. It was a silent tear, perhaps of relief, perhaps of a pain beginning to find an outlet. She extended a trembling little hand and touched Luro's beak. The parrot responded with a gentle peck on her finger. "Are you hungry, Lily?" Zay asked. Remembering she hadn't eaten anything since she was abandoned, he had some crackers and dried fruit in the cabin, but didn't know if it would be good to give her anything now. She shook her head negatively, her eyes still watery. Only exhaustion and shock seemed to dominate her. The distant sound of a siren began to be heard, breaking the night's silence. Zay felt a new surge of adrenaline. Help was truly coming. He looked at Lily, who flinched slightly at the sound, but didn't show the panic from before. She seemed to trust Zay, and that was a small comfort. "It's the ambulance, little one," Zay explained, his voice calm. "They'll take care of you. Everything will be all right." He knew that everything will be all right was too grand a promise for that moment. Lily had a long and difficult journey ahead, but for now she was safe, and that in itself was a miracle. Zay's truck, once just a means of transport, had transformed into a sanctuary, a turning point in the life of an abandoned girl and a parrot who refused to be silent. The siren approached, louder, more urgent, announcing the arrival of a new chapter. The sound of the siren grew, tearing through the night's quiet like an alarm cry. In a few seconds, the rotating lights of an ambulance, and right behind it, a police car, painted the forest's darkness with blue and red flashes. The vehicle stopped on the shoulder, a few meters from Zay's truck, and their doors opened almost simultaneously. 3 figures emerged, 2 paramedics in green uniforms and a police officer, his silhouette imposing against the headlights. They approached the truck with quick steps, their flashlights sweeping the cabin's interior. Zay opened the driver's door, feeling the weight of fatigue in every muscle, but adrenaline still kept him alert. "Here! She's here!" he exclaimed, his voice hoarse. The police officer, a middle-aged man with a serious face, was the first to approach. "Sir, what happened? Where is the child?" "Inside the truck," Zay replied, pointing to Lily, who was now more awake, her eyes wide with fear at seeing the strangers. Luro, on the dashboard, let out an alert squawk, perching closer to the girl. The paramedics, a woman and a man, carefully opened the passenger door. "Hello, little one," said the female paramedic, her voice soft and reassuring. "We're here to help." Lily huddled even further under the blanket, her eyes fixed on Zay. She extended a small hand, as if asking for protection. Zay leaned in, touching her arm. "It's all right, Lily. They're friends. They'll take care of you." Luro, sensing the tension, flew to Zay's shoulder. "Lily, safe. Zay, friend," he repeated, looking at the paramedics. The police officer and paramedics exchanged glances, surprised by the talking parrot. "A parrot?" the officer murmured, incredulity in his voice. "He's the one who brought me to her," Zay explained, feeling the urgent need to validate the story. "He asked me for help on the road, said a girl was in the forest, that her father abandoned her." While Zay spoke, the female paramedic was already examining Lily, checking her temperature and pulse, asking her name and age. Lily responded in monosyllables, her voice almost inaudible, but she seemed to cooperate. The other paramedic prepared a stretcher. "Sir, we need more details," said the police officer, pulling out a notepad. "Can you come with me to the patrol car? We need a formal statement." Zay hesitated, looking at Lily. She was being carefully lifted by the paramedic, who wrapped her in a thermal blanket. I don't want to leave her," he said, his voice choked. "She'll be safe with us, sir," the paramedic assured him. "We're taking her to the hospital for a full evaluation. She needs care." Lily, already in the paramedic's arms, looked at Zay, her eyes welling up. "Zay," she whispered, extending her hand. Zay felt a pang in his heart. He had grown attached to this little life in just a few hours. "I'll see you again, little one," he promised, his voice faltering. "I promise." Luro flew from Zay's shoulder to the paramedic's shoulder, nuzzling Lily's head. "Lily, Zay, friend." The paramedic smiled slightly at the parrot, who seemed to be saying goodbye. She then handed him to Zay. "He can stay with you for now, sir. We need to take the girl." With a last look at Zay, Lily was placed on the stretcher and taken to the ambulance. The door closed, and Zay felt a sudden emptiness, as if a part of him had been taken away. The police officer led him to the patrol car, where Zay, with Luro perched on his shoulder, began to narrate the unbelievable story. He described every detail: the parrot on the road, the words Lily, forest, bad father, the search in the darkness, the encounter with the girl, the fear, the cold, the exhaustion. He spoke with a sincerity that left no room for doubt. "So, the parrot was the one who raised the alarm?" the officer asked, still trying to process the information. "Yes, sir. He's the hero here," Zay replied, stroking Luro's head. "He witnessed everything. He can describe the man." Luro, as if understanding, let out a squawk and repeated, "Bad father, black car, big, Zay, good." The officer wrote everything down, his expression serious. "This is extraordinary. We need all the details about this man, the car, anything the parrot might have seen." While Zay spoke, the ambulance turned on its sirens again and departed, the red and blue lights diminishing in the distance. Zay watched until it disappeared completely. A new chapter had begun for Lily, a chapter of recovery and, he hoped, of justice. For him, there remained the solitude of the roadside, the silence of the night, and the silent promise that he would not abandon her. The police officer, Sergeant Almeida, closed his notepad with a dry snap, his expression still a mix of skepticism and fascination. "So, if I understand correctly, sir, a parrot, this parrot here," he pointed to Luro, who was perched on Zay's shoulder, "was the one who alerted you about an abandoned child in the forest?" Zay nodded, exhaustion weighing on his eyelids. "Exactly, Sergeant. He was on the road, shouting, 'Lily, forest, bad father.' I stopped, and he led me to her." Luro, as if to confirm, squawked loudly, "Bad father, Lily, sad, Zay, good." Sergeant Almeida scratched the back of his neck, clearly perplexed. "In 20 years of service, I've never heard anything like this. A parrot as a key witness. That's unprecedented." He sighed. "Well, as strange as it sounds, the girl was found, and your story matches what the paramedic reported about her condition. Shock, mild hypothermia, signs of abandonment." "And her father, Sergeant?" Zay asked, his voice full of urgency. Luro described him. "Black car, big." "Yes, sir. I wrote everything down," Almeida replied, flipping through some pages of his pad. "He mentioned black car, big. Can the parrot give more details about the man? Hair color, clothes, anything that might help us identify him?" Zay looked at Luro. "Luro, did you see Lily's father? What was he like?" The parrot tilted its head, its bright eyes fixed on Zay, then on the sergeant. "Father, tall, dark hair, suit, bad smell." Luro made a face, ruffling his feathers. Bad, very bad. Almeida quickly noted. Tall, dark hair, suit. Bad smell? What does he mean by bad smell? Zay pondered. Maybe strong perfume, or he associated bad with a specific smell. Luro is very observant. Interesting, the sergeant murmured. That's a starting point. We'll issue an alert with those characteristics and the vehicle description. We need to find this man. He looked at Zay with new seriousness. Sir, your action was crucial. Without you and, well, without your friend here, the outcome could have been tragic. Zay felt a warmth in his chest, but concern for Lily still dominated him. I just did what anyone would do. But what about Lily? What's going to happen to her now? She'll be taken to the hospital for examinations and then referred to Child Protective Services, Almeida explained. They'll look for close relatives, but with her father's situation, it's likely she'll need temporary foster care. The idea of Lily being alone again, in an unknown place, squeezed Zay's heart. I promised her I'd see her again. The sergeant looked at Zay, noticing the connection that had formed. I understand, sir, but the process is complex. For now, the priority is her safety and well-being. He paused. We'll need you to come to the police station tomorrow to formalize your statement and perhaps for the Parrot, to reiterate his testimony if possible for our investigators. That could be a great help. Zay nodded. I'll be there. Anytime. Sergeant Almeida stood up. Very well, sir. I appreciate your cooperation. The forensics team will come to examine the area where the girl was found. You can go home if you wish. Your truck won't be needed for the investigation. Zay looked at the truck, which seemed like a sleeping giant under the patrol car's lights. The cabin, which hours earlier had been a refuge of hope, now felt empty. Lily's absence was palpable. I'll stay here a little longer, Zay said, his voice low, just to make sure everything is all right. Sergeant Almeida nodded, understanding. As you prefer. We'll keep you informed about the investigation's progress, and about the girl. With a nod, the sergeant returned to his patrol car, making some radio calls. The police lights continued to pulse, but the ambulance had already disappeared, taking little Lily with it and the promise of an uncertain future. Zay sat on the step of his truck, Luro nestled on his shoulder. The night silence, once broken by sirens, now returned, heavy and thoughtful. He looked into the darkness of the forest, imagining the terror Lily must have felt there. A shiver ran down his spine. He had done his part, but Lily's journey was just beginning, and he somehow felt that his was too. The promise to see her again echoed in his mind, a commitment he would do everything to fulfill. The solitary truck driver had found a purpose beyond the road, an unexpected bond that tied him to a girl and an extraordinary parrot. Zay sat heavily on the step of his truck, his body protesting against the accumulated exhaustion, but his mind still in a whirlwind. Luro, on his shoulder, was strangely quiet, nestled against his neck, as if he also felt the emptiness left by the ambulance's departure. Sergeant Almeida's patrol car light still pulsed, casting dancing shadows in the forest's darkness, but the sound of the ambulance sirens had already faded into the horizon. A heavy silence descended upon them, interrupted only by the rustling of leaves in the night breeze and Sergeant Almeida's muffled murmurs into his radio. Zay looked at the dense forest, a dark and impenetrable shroud. Just hours ago, that place had been the scene of Lily's terror, and he, a stranger, had been her only link to hope. Now she was safe, but the image of her tear-filled eyes, an outstretched little hand, still haunted him. Lily, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Luro squawked softly in response, nuzzling his cheek. Zay, friend, the parrot repeated, almost like a prayer. Zay felt a knot in his throat. He had promised he would see her again. But how? He was just a truck driver, a stranger who happened to be in the right place at the right time. The system, he knew, was impersonal and complex. Lily would be taken to a hospital, then to Child Protective Services. Would he be allowed to see her? The uncertainty was a heavy burden. Sergeant Almeida approached again, notepad in hand. "Mr. Zay, the forensics team is on its way. They'll cordon off the area and look for any evidence that might lead us to the girl's father." He paused, observing Zay's tired expression. "Are you sure you don't want to go home? It's already dawn. You look exhausted." Zay shook his head. I need to stay a little longer, Sergeant. I can't leave now. Not after everything." Almeida nodded, understanding more than Zay imagined. "All right. But remember, we need you at the police station tomorrow morning as soon as you can. We need to formalize everything and, if possible, get your friend's testimony here." He looked at Luro with a mix of respect and curiosity. "He's a crucial piece of this." "I'll be there," Zay assured him, his voice firm. "Anytime you need me." The sergeant moved away to brief the first officers arriving to cordon off the area. Zay watched the activity, the flashing lights, the low voices. The chaos of discovery and rescue was giving way to methodical investigation. He stroked Luro's feathers. "You were incredible, buddy. You saved Lily." Luro, as if understanding the gravity of his words, puffed out his chest. "Lily? Safe. Zay. Good. Bad father. Black car." He repeated the details, like an echo of the night, keeping the story alive. Zay closed his eyes for a moment, the night's images flashing like a film, the parrot on the road, the desperate search in the forest, the relief of finding Lily, the warmth of her small body under the blanket. He had been just a solitary truck driver, accustomed to the routine of the road, but that night had changed everything. He had become a guardian, a protector, and now a link in the pursuit of justice. The promise to Lily wasn't just a phrase uttered in the heat of the moment. It was a commitment he felt in every fiber of his being. He would see her again. He would do everything to ensure she was safe and that the man who abandoned her paid for his actions. The road called him, but a new path had opened before him, a path paved with hope and determination. As the day timidly began to lighten on the horizon, Zay remained there, the parrot on his shoulder, the truck a silent monument to the night that changed their lives. The rising sun would bring a new day, and with it the promise of a new battle, a battle for little Lily and for the truth. Almeida frowned, considering the idea. "That's a good observation, sir. We hadn't thought of that. Generally, bad smell is very subjective, but coming from the parrot, it could be a more concrete clue. I'll add that to the suspect's description. Any detail can be useful." The rising sun, a pale and hesitant disk, finally broke the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. Sergeant Almeida's patrol car lights, now less urgent, seemed almost an anachronism under the natural light. Zay felt the pre-dawn chill give way to fresher air, but the exhaustion in his bones was profound. He hadn't slept, and every muscle protested. Luro, still nestled on his shoulder, seemed to have fallen asleep, his small, warm body a counterpoint to Zay's stiffness. "Mr. Zay," Almeida approached, his voice lower, almost a whisper. "The forensics team is already on site. They'll take some time. I suggest you go to the police station now. We can start formalizing your statement and Luro's." Zay nodded, his movement slow and heavy. "All right. Sergeant, let's go." He got up from the truck step, feeling a crack in his spine. The forest, once a dark monster, now revealed its contours, its tall and imposing trees, but still guarding dark secrets. The drive to the police station was silent. Zay drove his truck, the engine purring familiarly, but the road felt different. each kilometre a bridge between the night's horror and the day's uncertainty. Luro woke up, stretching and chirping softly. Police station. Zay, Lily. Yes, buddy. We'll tell them everything that happened, Zay replied, his voice a little hoarse. He felt a mix of apprehension and determination. How would the system handle a Parrot witness? Would they believe them? And Lily, where would she be now? Upon arriving at the police station, the atmosphere was one of cold, impersonal bureaucracy, a stark contrast to the forest's urgency. The smell of strong coffee and old paper hung in the air. Sergeant Almeida led them to an interrogation room, small and with a metal table in the center. Sit down, Mr. Zay. I'll call a clerk to take your statement. Almeida indicated a chair. And Luro, can we leave him here on the table for now? Zay carefully placed Luro on the table. The parrot looked around with curiosity, his small, intelligent eyes taking in every detail. The clerk, a middle-aged man with glasses perched on his nose, entered with a pad and pen. He cast a surprised glance at Luro, but maintained his professional composure. Good morning, sir. We'll start with your personal details and then the account of the facts. Zay began to narrate from the moment he saw Luro on the road, the initial distrust, the parrot's insistence, the search in the forest, the encounter with Lily. He described the girl, the fear in her eyes, the blanket covering her. Each word was an effort, reliving the anguish of those hours. When he got to the part about the parrot, the clerk raised an eyebrow. So the parrot was the one who alerted you? Yes, Zay affirmed. He kept repeating, Lily, forest, bad father, black car, and he knew the way. He guided me to her. The clerk exchanged a look with Almeida, who nodded. Luro is a very special parrot, clerk. He has an impressive communication ability. Black car, bad father. Luro repeated, as if to confirm the story. The clerk's eyes widened. He really talks? He not only talks, he's the main witness, Zay said, feeling a glimmer of hope. He saw Lily's father. He said the man had a bad smell. Almeida intervened. Zay suggested that bad smell could be alcohol or cigarette, clerk. It's a clue we should consider. Bad smell, bad father. Luro reinforced, shaking his head. The clerk began to write frantically, surprise giving way to intense focus. Right. Parrot witness. Suspect details. Male, victim's father, black car, strong smell, possibly alcohol or cigarette. Zay continued, describing the rescue, the arrival of the police, the ambulance. He finished with his promise to Lily. I promised her I'd see her again, Sergeant. How is she? Where was she taken? Almeida sighed. She was taken to the municipal hospital for examinations and observation. Afterwards, Child Protective Services will be notified. It's standard procedure in cases of child abandonment. And can I see her? Zay's voice betrayed his anxiety. That will depend on Child Protective Services, Mr. Zay, Almeida replied, his voice softer. You are not related to the girl, but your involvement is undeniable. We will do our best to keep you informed about the case's progress. The answer wasn't what Zay wanted to hear, but he knew it was the reality. Bureaucracy was a wall, but he wouldn't give up. He looked at Luro, who watched him attentively. Lily, safe, Zay, good. The parrot squawked, as if reading his thoughts. Zay felt a warmth in his chest. He wasn't alone in this. He had Luro, and together they would do everything to bring the truth to light and ensure Lily got the justice she deserved. The battle was just beginning, but Zay's determination was unshakable. The clerk, his pen still poised over the paper, looked at Zay with an expression that mixed skepticism and admiration. Mr. Zay, this is an unusual statement. A parrot as a primary witness. I've never seen anything like it in my 30 years of service. Sergeant Almeida intervened, his voice calm. But the facts are there, Clark. The girl was found, and Laura was the one who led us to her. The details he provided about the father and the car are crucial. Black car, bad father, bad smell. Laura repeated, like a mantra, confirming his part in the narrative. The clerk shook his head, finally noting the parrot's observation with more seriousness. All right, we'll formalize everything. Mr. Z will sign the statement, and we'll make an official record of Lauro's participation. He looked at the parrot. We'll need a statement. Let's say, under oath from Lauro, if he can repeat the details for a judge should the case proceed. Zay felt a glimmer of hope. He can. He's very intelligent. He knows what he saw. Almeida nodded. Meanwhile, the forensics team is working in the forest. They'll look for any traces, footprints, tire marks from the black car Lauro mentioned, and the bad smell description will be taken into consideration in the search for the suspect. He turned to Zay. You can go home now, Mr. Zay. You've done what you could. Leave the rest to us. But Zay shook his head. I can't, Sergeant. Not yet. I need to know. I need to know how Lily is. And I need to make sure this man is found. He looked at Lauro. We promised her. Almeida sighed, understanding the truck driver's stubbornness. Look, Mr. Zay, the process is lengthy. Lily is in the hospital under medical care. Afterwards, as I said, Child Protective Services will take over. They are responsible for ensuring the child's safety and well-being. They will decide on her future, whether with close relatives, if any, or in a temporary shelter. And me? Can I visit her? Zay's voice was filled with urgency. I saved her. I feel responsible for her. I understand your feelings, Mr. Zay, Almeida said, his voice softer. But legally, you are a stranger. Child Protective Services is very strict about who has access to children under their care. They need to ensure the child is safe and that there is no risk. Your involvement was heroic, no doubt, but that doesn't automatically grant you visitation rights. Those words hit Zay like a blow. He knew it was the truth, but the coldness of bureaucracy was a brutal contrast to the warmth of Lily's small hand in his. So, I can't do anything? It's not that you can't do anything, Almeida corrected. You are a key witness. Your collaboration is vital for us to find her father, and we can try to intercede with Child Protective Services, explaining your fundamental role in the rescue. But I can't promise anything. The child's well-being is their highest priority. Zay looked at Lauro, who seemed to sense his friend's anguish. Lily? Zay? Good. Bad father. Ah, the parrot repeated as if to reaffirm the connection between them. He's her family now, Sergeant, Zay said, pointing to Lauro. He knows her. He loves her. Almeida observed the interaction, a hint of emotion in his experienced eyes. We'll do what's within our reach, Mr. Zay, but you need to understand that there are limits. The best you can do now is rest and be available for any other information that might emerge. Zay nodded slowly. He signed the statement, his hand still trembling slightly. The interrogation room, once a stage for the revelation of an extraordinary story, now seemed just a cold, formal room. As he left the police station, the sun was already high and the city was waking up to its routine. But for Zay, nothing would be routine again. He felt the weight of uncertainty about Lily, but also a renewed strength. The promise he made to that girl in the forest wasn't just a promise, it was a purpose. He couldn't see her, perhaps, but he could fight for her. He could ensure justice was done. Come on, Laura, he said, stroking the parrot on his shoulder. We have a bad father to find. Lauro squawked in response, his voice an echo of determination. Bad father, black car, Zay, Lily. The battle wasn't just against time or against a criminal. It was also against the indifference of the system, against the distance imposed by law. But Zay had an unlikely ally and an unshakable promise. He knew this was just the beginning of a long journey, and he was ready for every step of it. He wouldn't leave. He would stay in the city, waiting, watching, ready to act. Lily needed him, and he wouldn't abandon her. Zay walked back to his truck, the driver who once only thought of roads and deliveries, now with his mind fixed on a little girl and a talking parrot. He parked the vehicle in a nearby truck stop, where he paid for a few days' stay. It was a safe place for his livelihood, but he couldn't stay there. He needed to be closer to the hospital, the police station, whatever was the center of Lily's life now. With Luro on his shoulder, Zay began to look for a cheap boarding house, a simple room he could rent for a few days. He didn't have much money to spend on lodging, but he knew he couldn't go back on the road. Not now. Each step was heavy, but his determination propelled him. He found a small boarding house on the outskirts, a modest place with a faded sign. The lady who attended him, a gray-haired woman with curious eyes, didn't mind Luro. "As long as he doesn't make too much mess, the little bird can stay," she said with a smile. Zay thanked her, relieved. In the small room, with a creaking bed and a window overlooking an alley, Zay sat on the edge of the bed, Luro perched on the headboard. The silence of the room was a stark contrast to the hum of the truck engine or the bustle of the police station. It was a silence that made room for thoughts. Lily, Zay, sad. Luro squawked, as if sensing Zay's melancholy. "Yeah, buddy, sad and worried," Zay replied, running a hand through his hair, not being able to see her, not knowing how she is. "It's hard." He took out his cell phone and dialed the police station number, the same one Sergeant Almeida had given him. A female voice answered, formal and impersonal. "Central Police Station, good morning." "Good morning. I'm Zay, the truck driver who brought the Parrot. About the case of the girl Lily," he began, his voice a little hesitant. "I wanted to know if there's any news about her, or about the investigation." "Mr. Zay, Sergeant Almeida is in the field. We have no new information for the public at the moment," the voice replied without emotion. "The case is under investigation. Child Protective Services is aware." "But what about the girl? Is she okay? Can I get any news about her health?" Zay insisted, frustration growing. "Sir, information about minors is confidential. The hospital cannot disclose it. Child Protective Services is responsible. Please await contact from the authorities." The line was cut. Zay sighed, the phone still in his hand. Bureaucracy was an impenetrable wall. He wasn't family. He wasn't a social worker. He was just a truck driver who had found a child and a parrot. "Bad father, Zay, Lily," Luro repeated, as if reminding Zay of the true enemy. "You're right, Luro. I can't just stand by," Zay said, standing up. He couldn't see Lily, but he could do something to find the man who abandoned her. He could be the eyes and ears on the street while the police followed their own protocols. He opened his backpack, took out a city map he had bought at the bus station, and spread it on the bed. If Lily's father was a rich man, he wouldn't live just anywhere. And if he had a black car and a bad smell, perhaps he frequented certain types of places. Zay didn't know where to start, but the idea of just waiting was unbearable. He looked at Luro, who watched him with his intelligent eyes. "Do you remember anything else, buddy? Any details about the house, the car, the man?" Luro tilted his head thoughtfully. "Big house, gate, black, bad father. Bad smell." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Zay knew the city was big, but he wasn't alone. He had Luro, and the promise to Lily was a fire burning in his chest. He wasn't a detective, but he was a man of his word, and he would do everything to ensure justice was done. The journey would be long and uncertain, but Zay was ready to begin. Zay folded the map, putting it in his pocket. There was no point in staying there, speculating. He needed to act. With Luro comfortably perched on his shoulder, he left the boarding house. The city, with its buildings and busy streets, seemed like a labyrinth, but Zay had a clear objective. He decided to start with the wealthier neighborhoods, where big houses and black gates would be more common. They took a bus, Zay paying the fare with the few notes he had left. Luro attracted curious glances, but Zay ignored them. His mind was focused. He got off in a wooded area, with imposing mansions hidden behind high walls and well-maintained hedges. Every gate was a possibility, every black car that passed a potential clue. Zay walked slowly, his eyes scanning every detail. The afternoon sun began to set, painting the sky in orange hues. Frustration threatened to set in. How many big houses were there in that city? How many black cars? He felt like a grain of sand on an endless beach. Bad father, Lilin, Zay. Luro squawked as a constant reminder. I know, buddy. We won't give up, Zay murmured, more to himself than to the parrot. They turned a corner, and Zay stopped abruptly. Ahead, on a particularly quiet and exclusive street, there was a property that stood out. A huge house, with modern and imposing architecture, surrounded by a high stone wall and, yes, a massive black wrought-iron gate. It was exactly as Luro had described. Zay's heart began to beat faster. He hid behind a dense bush, observing. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the distant chirping of some birds. Minutes dragged on, feeling like hours. Zay felt tension tighten his chest. Could it be here? Then the hum of an engine broke the silence. A sleek, gleaming black car turned the corner and approached the gate. It was a luxury model with tinted windows. The black gate opened automatically, and the car slid into the property. A man got out of the vehicle. Zay couldn't see his face clearly, as he was facing away, but the figure was tall and corpulent. The moment the man turned to close the car door, a light breeze blew in Zay's direction, and then he smelled it. A strong, metallic, unpleasant odor, like chemicals mixed with something rancid. The bad smell Luro had mentioned. Luro on Zay's shoulder began to agitate, his feathers bristling. Bad father, bad smell! Lily, Lily! The parrot squawked, his shrill voice echoing in the street silence. The man, who was about to enter the house, stopped. He looked around, seeming confused, trying to identify the source of the sound. Zay crouched even further into the bush, covering Luro's beak with his hand, trying to muffle the bird's squawks. The man shrugged, apparently finding nothing, and finally entered the mansion, the gate closing behind him with a soft hum. Zay let out a trembling sigh. He had found him. Lily's father, that wealthy man, with the black car and the bad smell, who had abandoned his own daughter in the forest. Anger and satisfaction mingled in his chest. The promise he had made to that girl now seemed closer to being fulfilled. With his hands still trembling, Zay took his cell phone from his pocket. He dialed Sergeant Almeida's number, feeling the weight of responsibility and the adrenaline of the discovery. "Sergeant," Zay said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "I found him. Lily's father. I know where he lives." The silence on the other end of the line was filled by Zay's heavy breathing and Luro's agitated squawks. The journey wasn't over yet, but Zay knew this was the decisive step. Justice, he hoped, was on its way. He had done his part. Now it was the system's turn, and he would be there, waiting to ensure that his promise to Lily was fully honored.